Blood don't lie. And the crimson streaks smeared across my fence post dark against the weathered timber told a story I had no stomach to read. For 12 long years, nothing had dared disturb the silence of my ranch. Nothing but the whisper of the wind and the lowing of my cattle. But there she was crumpled against the rough wood, her dress torn, breathing shallow, barely alive. I'd built this isolation brick by agonizing brick after what happened to my family, after the fire, after the whispers and accusations that clung to me like smoke from a burning house. I'd chosen this emptiness miles from anywhere. No neighbors, no visitors, no damned complications. Just me, my herd, and the kind of peace that comes from being forgotten by the world. I stood 30 feet away, my old Winchester loose in my hands. My gaze swept over the woman who'd shattered my carefully constructed solitude. She couldn't be a day over 30, dark hair matted with dirt and something darker. Her hands were pressed against her side where the fabric had ripped, and blood had seeped through, painting a grim picture. She hadn't seen me yet, her eyes squeezed shut, face pale as morning frost. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn to walk back to the house, to pretend I'd never laid eyes on her. In my experience, helping strangers only ever dragged you into a fresh hell, and hell was the one place Jedediah Stone had sworn never to invite back into his life. But then she shifted, a small, ragged sound escaping her lips, pain mixed with exhaustion. Something in that sound, raw and desperate, cut through the 12 years of walls I'd painstakingly erected around my heart. I found myself taking a step forward, then another. Her eyes fluttered open when my shadow fell across her, green eyes sharp despite the agony, and they fixed on me with a desperate hope that made my chest tighten, a knot of unease and something else I couldn't name. She tried to speak, but it was just a whisper too faint to catch. I crouched, keeping the rifle across my knees, maintaining a cautious distance even as I moved closer. Up close, I saw the full extent of her injuries, ragged cuts on her arms, bruising blossoming along her jaw, and that wound on her side soaking through her dress. Someone had hurt her bad. Then she spoke again, her voice cracked in raw, fragile plea. Please, they're coming. Those 2 words, those 2 simple, terrifying words changed everything. Because if someone was coming, if someone was hunting this woman, then my 12 years of hard-won peace were about to go up in smoke whether I helped her or not. And Jedediah Stone was about to face the one choice I'd spent over a decade avoiding, getting tangled up in someone else's fight. But as I looked into those desperate green eyes, I realized the choice might already be made for me. My first instinct was to leave her there. My second, a traitorous whisper in my mind, was to help. But the third, the one that won out, was to get answers before either option got me killed. Who's coming? I asked, my voice a low rasp, as I glanced toward the horizon where dust clouds could hide approaching riders. She tried to sit straighter, wincing, a gasp of pain catching in her throat as the movement pulled at her wounds. Men from Dead Rock Gulch. 3 of them, maybe 4. Her voice carried the kind of exhaustion that only came from running hard and long, chasing shadows and outrunning devils. They've been tracking me since yesterday. Dead Rock Gulch. I knew the place. A settlement 40 miles south known for 2 things: silver mining, and the kind of men who ask no questions about a person's past. If she'd run from there, she'd either stolen something valuable or seen something she wasn't supposed to. What did you do? The question came out harder than I intended, blunt and unpolished. 12 years of isolation had chipped away at whatever social grace I once possessed. Her eyes flashed, a flicker of anger mixed with hurt. What makes you think I did anything wrong? Because innocent folks don't usually end up bleeding against my fence posts with killers on their trail. She looked away, her jaw tightening. For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer, that she'd clam up and leave me guessing. Then she spoke so quietly I had to lean closer, straining to catch the words. I saw him murder a family. The Hendersons. They had a claim near the gulch. Found something worth killing for. Her hands trembled as she pressed them tighter against her side, trying to staunch the flow of blood. I was there to buy supplies. Wrong place, wrong time. I studied her face, searching for the tells that would mark her as a liar. I'd gotten good at reading people in the years before the isolation had to be in my line of work. But her eyes held steady, and the tremor in her voice sounded like raw trauma, not deceit. So you ran, I stated, a grim fact. What else was I supposed to do? Stay and let 'em silence the only witness? She met my gaze again, her green eyes piercing. They killed a whole family over whatever the Hendersons found. You think they'd hesitate to kill one more person? A sound drifted across the plains, distant but unmistakable. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses riding hard. My head snapped up. I rose to my feet, rifle-ready eyes scanning the horizon. There. A dust cloud maybe 2 miles out, moving fast straight for my property. 4 riders. Just like she'd said. The woman, I still didn't know her name, struggled to stand, using the fence for support. Please, she whispered, her voice a desperate plea. I won't bring you trouble. Just point me toward water and I'll keep running. But I was already calculating. 4 armed men probably desperate to cover their tracks. If they'd kill a whole family for whatever the Hendersons had found, they wouldn't leave loose ends. And now that they'd tracked her to my land, I was already involved whether I liked it or not. The hoofbeats were getting closer, growing louder, vibrating through the ground. In less than 10 minutes, those riders would crest the hill and see my ranch. They'd see her. They'd see me. And Jedediah Stone would have to decide whether 12 years of peaceful isolation was worth dying for. I made my decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Not because I was brave, and certainly not because I was foolish. I made it because I recognized something in that woman's eyes. The same desperate, cornered look I'd seen in my own mirror 12 years ago. "Can you walk?" I asked, already moving toward her. She nodded, though the way she gripped the fence post suggested walking would be more hope than reality. "My name's Alara Vance," she managed, as I slipped an arm around her waist, supporting her weight. "Jed Stone," I grunted. "And we're about to get very well acquainted with my root cellar." The cellar. It was my insurance policy, a hidden space beneath the kitchen floor where I'd stored emergency supplies, and if I was honest, where I'd always planned to hide if my past ever caught up with me. I'd never imagined hiding someone else. As we hurried toward the house, Alara stumbled, her legs threatening to give out. Without thinking, I swept her up, carrying her the remaining distance. She was lighter than I'd expected, fragile, in a way that made my chest tighten with an emotion I'd buried years ago deep beneath layers of stone and silence. The hoofbeats were louder, now close enough that I could distinguish the individual horses, their heavy breathing, audible even over the thud of my own heart. Inside the house, I gently set Alara down and pulled up the concealed trapdoor. The cellar was small but well-stocked, water-dried food, medical supplies. I'd learned the value of preparation the hard way. "There's bandages down there," I said, helping her down the ladder, my voice low and urgent. "Tend your wounds. Stay quiet no matter what you hear." Alara grabbed my wrist before I could close the door, her grip surprisingly strong. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Don't know if I'm telling the truth." I looked down at her upturned face, saw the genuine confusion there. How long had it been since someone had shown her kindness without expecting something? Anything in return. Maybe I recognized the look of someone running from something they can't fight. I said quietly, the words feeling foreign on my tongue after so long. "Maybe I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go." Before she could respond, I closed the trap door and scattered the rug back over it, making sure it looked undisturbed. The approaching horses were maybe a minute out now. I could hear them clearly, 4 riders, just as Alara had said, their mounts breathing hard from a long, relentless chase. I checked my Winchester, the familiar weight of comfort in my hands, then moved to the window. The riders topped the hill in a cloud of dust and fury, spreading out as they approached my property. Hard men with harder faces, the kind who wore their violence like other men wore hats. The leader, a tall man with a wicked scar running from his ear to his jaw, raised a hand, bringing the group to a halt 50 yards from the house. Even at that distance, I could see the cold, calculating glint in the man's eyes. "You Whitmore," the scarred man called out, his voice cutting through the dry air. I stepped onto my porch rifle, held casually but ready. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Rattlesnake Silas. We're tracking a woman. Dangerous criminal. You seen anyone come through here, and there it was. The lie that would force me to choose between my safety and my conscience. Because I could see in Silas's eyes that this man had killed before, and would kill again without a flicker of hesitation. I'd lied before. During the war. After the war. And in the dark years that followed, when truth was a luxury I couldn't afford. But standing on my porch facing Rattlesnake Silas, I realized this lie would cost me everything I'd built. "Haven't seen a soul in weeks," I said, my voice steady despite the weight of the rifle in my hands, despite the tremor starting deep in my gut. "Gets lonely out here. But that's how I like it." Silas's eyes narrowed, scanning my property with the thoroughness of a man who'd tracked prey before. His gaze lingered on the fence posts, where Alara's blood had dried dark against the weathered wood. "Funny thing," Silas drawled, dismounting with practiced ease, his movements slow and deliberate, a predator sizing up its prey. "We followed her trail right to your property line. Blood trail, too. Woman was hurt bad when she passed through." The other 3 riders, spread out, not threatening exactly, but positioned like men who knew how confrontations ended. I recognized the formation. I'd used it myself in another life. "Blood could be from anything," I replied, my voice flat. "Coyotes hunt through here regular. Maybe your woman tangled with something with teeth." Silas smiled, but it was the kind of smile that preceded a bullet. "Mind if we take a look around just to ease our minds?" It wasn't a request. I could see that in the way Silas's hand rested near his gun and the way the other men watched my every movement. They'd search my property whether I agreed or not. The only question was whether they'd kill me first or after. "Free country," I said, stepping aside, though my hand tightened on my rifle. "Though I'd appreciate you not disturbing my cattle." They spook easy. As Silas approached the porch, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. Mud on the man's boots. But not just any mud. The distinctive red clay that only came from one place in this territory, the same clay that covered the Henderson property near Dead Rock Gulch. Alara had been telling the truth. Silas was close enough now that I could smell the stale whiskey on his breath, see the dried blood under his fingernails. This wasn't just a killer. This was a man who enjoyed his work. "Nice place you got here," Whitmore Silas said, his eyes taking in every detail of the house lingering on the windows. Quiet, private, the kind of place where a man could hide things, or people. "I'm a simple rancher," I replied, my voice devoid of inflection. "Don't have much use for hiding anything. Simple rancher." Silas chuckled, a dry rasping sound. "That's what they all say. But you know what I think? I think you got secrets, Whitmore. I can smell 'em on you." One of the other riders called out from near the barn. "Silas, found fresh horse tracks. Someone was here recent." My mind raced. Those would be my own tracks from this morning's ride to check the fence line. But Silas wouldn't know that. And in his current mood, the man was likely to assume the worst. Silas's hand moved closer to his gun. "Thought you said you hadn't seen anyone." "I said I hadn't seen a soul," I countered, my voice. Level my finger, finding the trigger of my rifle. "Didn't say I hadn't left my own property. Rode out to check my fence line this morning. Found some posts damaged. Probably the same animal that left that blood." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. I could feel the weight of the moment, the terrible balance between truth and lies, between safety and catastrophe. Then Silas smiled again, a slow, predatory grin, and I knew that whatever happened next, my 12 years of peace were about to end in violence. The tension broke when Silas stepped onto the porch, uninvited. That single act crossed a line I'd drawn in blood 12 years ago. No one entered my sanctuary without permission. "Let's have that look inside," Silas said, his hand now resting openly on his gun. I raised my rifle an inch, not quite a threat, but close enough to make my position clear. "I'd rather you didn't." Wasn't asking. Silas's 3 men moved closer, their intentions written in the way they positioned themselves. This was about to become a fight, and they all knew it. But before anyone could draw, a new sound cut through the tension. Hoofbeats approaching fast from the east. A single rider pushing his horse hard across the open ground. Silas cursed under his breath, his attention divided between me and the approaching stranger. In that moment of distraction, I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart sink. One of Silas's men was studying the ground near the porch, following a trail I couldn't see but knew was there droplets of Alara's blood leading straight toward the house. The approaching rider topped the ridge, and I could see him clearly now. A young man, maybe 25, with the kind of desperate urgency that came from carrying bad news. He pulled up hard in front of the group, his horse lathered and breathing heavy. "Silas," the young man gasped, his voice strained. "We got problems back in Dead Rock. Sheriff's asking questions about the Henderson place." Someone tipped him off. Silas's face went dark with rage. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that end with a rope if we don't clean this up fast." The young man's eyes darted to me, then back to Silas. "We need to ride now." For a moment I thought salvation had arrived, that Silas would be forced to abandon his search and deal with the larger threat. But then Silas's gaze fell on those drops of blood leading to the house, and his expression shifted to something infinitely more dangerous. "Curtis," Silas barked, his voice sharp as a razor, addressing the man tracking the blood trail. "What did you find?" Curtis pointed toward the house, his finger rigid. "Blood trail leads right to the front door. She's here." The words hit me like a physical blow. My deception had been discovered, and now 4 armed killers stood between me and the woman I'd sworn to protect. Worse, they were desperate men facing a hangman's noose if they didn't silence every witness. Silas drew his gun with practiced speed, the metallic click echoing in the sudden quiet. "Bring her out, Whitmore. Do it now, and maybe we'll make this quick for both of you." But I was already moving, my 12 years of isolation stripped away in an instant, revealing the man I'd been before. A man who'd learned that sometimes the only choice was to fight. My Winchester cracked like thunder, and Curtis dropped before his gun cleared leather. The shot echoed across the plains like a judgment, and suddenly the quiet ranch became a battlefield. Silas dove behind his horse, a desperate snarl tearing from his throat as my second shot splintered the porch post where his head had been moments before. The other 2 men scattered, seeking cover behind the water trough in the barn wall. Years of muscle memory kicked in. My hands worked the rifle action smooth and fast, just like I'd learned in the war, just like I'd hoped never to use again. "You picked the wrong side, Whitmore," Silas shouted from behind his horse, his voice raw with fury. "All this for some woman you don't even know." I didn't waste breath on an answer. I put a round through the water trough, sending the man behind it scrambling for better cover, cursing and dripping wet. The messenger, young and clearly unused to gunfights, had wheeled his horse and was riding hard back toward the ridge, apparently deciding that whatever waited in Deadrock was preferable to facing my rifle. Smart kid. Silas appeared around his horse's flank, pistol blazing. Bullets chewed splinters from the porch railing, as I dropped flat, rolling behind the heavy wooden bench I'd built for quiet evenings. Even now, the irony twisted in my gut. Quiet evenings I'd never have again. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. I counted shots, calculated angles, tried to remember everything I'd learned about staying alive when outnumbered. 2 men left beside Silas, both of them with clear shots at the house if I showed myself. Then I heard it, a sound that made my blood freeze. The trapdoor creaking open. "Don't," I called out, my voice a strangled whisper. But it was too late. Ilara's voice drifted up from the cellar, weak but determined. "Let me help, I can shoot, stay down," I hissed, my heart hammering against my ribs. But she was already climbing up, a pistol in her hand. My spare Colt, the one I'd kept in the emergency supplies. Silas heard the exchange and laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "That's right, girl. Come on out. Let's finish what we started at the Henderson place." Ilara appeared beside me, her face pale but her hands steady on the gun. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandages she'd applied, but her eyes burned with something beyond pain, something akin to a righteous fury. "They killed a little girl," she whispered to me, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Sarah Henderson. She was only 8 years old. Murdered her because she saw them kill her parents." The words hit me like bullets. An 8-year-old child. Suddenly, this wasn't about protecting a stranger anymore. It was about justice for the innocents these men had butchered. My own rage, long dormant, began to stir cold and sharp. "How many rounds you got?" I asked, my voice low. "5 in the gun, plus whatever's in your belt." I checked my Winchester. 3 rounds left, against Silas and 2 experienced killers. It wouldn't be enough for a straight fight, but then I remembered something. The old mining explosive I kept in the barn for clearing stumps. Dangerous to store but effective for more than just moving rocks. "Can you keep 'em busy for 2 minutes?" I asked, my gaze fixed on the barn, the distance seeming to stretch into an impossible chasm. Ilara nodded, though sweat beaded on her forehead from pain and effort. "What are you planning?" "Something stupid." I checked the distance to the barn again. 30 yards of open ground where any of the 3 men could cut me down. But maybe, just maybe, it was stupid enough to work. I looked at this woman I'd known for less than an hour, this stranger who'd brought violence back into my carefully ordered world. She could have stayed hidden, could have let me face this alone. Instead, she'd chosen to stand with me. "Ready?" I asked. Ilara positioned herself at the corner of the porch, Colt steady in her hands. "For Sarah Henderson," she murmured a vow. I sprinted toward the barn as Ilara opened fire, her shots forcing Silas and his men to keep their heads down. But 30 yards had never seemed so far, and I knew that any second one of those killers would risk Ilara's bullets for a clean shot at my back. My boots hit the barn floor as a bullet whistled past my ear, close enough to feel the heat. Behind me, Ilara's Colt barked steadily, keeping the killers honest. I dove toward the corner where I kept the mining supplies, my hands searching frantically for the small wooden box marked with a skull and crossbones. There, 2 sticks of dynamite fuses intact. Enough explosive to level half the barn or turn the tide of this fight. My fingers found the matches as another bullet punched through the barn wall, showering me with splinters. Outside, Ilara's shooting had stopped. Either she was reloading, or she was down. I didn't have time to find out which. I lit the first fuse with shaking hands, the spark catching with a sharp hiss. 20 seconds, maybe 30, before it blew. I sprinted back toward the barn door, dynamite in one hand, rifle in the other. Ilara was still alive, thank God, crouched behind the porch railing with blood running down her arm from a fresh graze. She saw me emerge from the barn and nodded. She understood what I was planning. Silas's voice rang out across the ranch, filled with a sneering confidence. "Give it up, Whitmore. You're outgunned and outmanned. Send the girl out and maybe I'll let you live." Instead of answering, I hurled the dynamite toward the water trough where 2 of Silas's men had taken cover. The stick tumbled end over end, fuse sparking like a fallen star. The explosion shattered the morning air, sending dirt and debris skyward in a massive geyser. When the dust cleared, one of Silas's men was motionless on the ground, a mangled heap. The other was crawling away, stunned and bleeding, whimpering like a whipped dog. But Silas himself had used the chaos to advance, and suddenly, he was at the porch steps, gun trained on Ilara's head. "Drop it, Whitmore." Silas's face was a mask of rage and desperation. "Drop it or I paint your porch with her brains." I froze, rifle halfway to my shoulder. 30 feet separated me from Silas, but it might as well have been 30 miles. At this range, the killer couldn't miss. Ilara looked at me across that impossible distance, and I saw something in her eyes that made my chest tighten. Not fear. Acceptance. She'd made peace with dying, probably made it back in Dead Rock Gulch when she decided to be the witness these killers couldn't silence. "Don't," she said quietly, her voice barely a breath. "Don't let him win." But Silas was already squeezing the trigger when the second stick of dynamite, the one I'd lit but kept hidden behind my back, rolled to a stop at the killer's feet. Silas's eyes went wide as he realized what was happening. He had perhaps 3 seconds to choose between shooting Alara and diving for cover. He chose wrong. The blast lifted Silas off his feet and hurled him backward, his gun spinning away into the dust. When the ringing in my ears finally faded, the ranch was silent except for the wind and the distant lowing of spooked cattle. Alara was alive, shaken but breathing. Silas lay motionless near the shattered remains of the porch steps, a broken mess. The surviving gunman had disappeared entirely, probably decided that whatever the sheriff in Dead Rock might do to him was preferable to facing more explosives. I walked slowly to where Alara sat, my rifle still ready but no longer needed. She looked up at me with those green eyes that had changed everything. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I surveyed my destroyed ranch, the shattered porch, the crater where my water trough used to be, the blood soaking into earth that had known only peace for 12 years. "Yeah," I said, reaching down to help her stand. "It's over." 3 days later, Sheriff Morrison arrived from Dead Rock Gulch with a posse and a wagon for the bodies and more questions than answers. He found me repairing my porch, the boards fresh and still smelling of pine, while Alara sat nearby, her wounds healing her presence. A permanent fixture in ways neither of us had planned. Morrison was a good man, honest in a territory where honesty was often fatal. He listened to our story, examined the bodies, and nodded grimly when I handed over the ore sample Silas had been carrying. Damning evidence of the silver claim that had gotten the Henderson family killed. Henderson found a vein worth killing for Morrison, explained, hefting the ore. Silas and his crew figured they could eliminate the family and claim the strike for themselves. They almost got away with it. The sheriff's eyes lingered on Alara, taking in her healing injuries and the determined set of her jaw. "You willing to testify in court about what you saw?" Every word, Alara replied without hesitation, her voice firm. "Sarah Henderson deserves that much." Morrison nodded and turned to me. "And you, Jed Stone, you've got quite a reputation from your war days. Some folks might wonder why a man with your skills chose to hide out here for so long." My hand stilled on the wood I was planing. "Sometimes a man needs to find peace before he can make it for others." "Well, you made plenty of peace here today," Morrison said, a wry smile touching his lips. Silas's gang was terrorizing half the territory. Word's already spreading about what happened out here. You might find folks coming by to shake your hand. The thought of visitors of my isolation being permanently broken should have filled me with dread. Instead, I found myself glancing at Alara, who was watching me with something that looked suspiciously like hope. After Morrison and his posse left, taking the bodies and their grim evidence with them, Alara and I sat on the partially rebuilt porch as the sunset painted the sky in shades of fire. "You could go anywhere now," I said quietly, the words feeling heavy. A strange mix of truth and a nascent fear of losing her. "Morrison offered to escort you to Denver, help you start fresh where nobody knows your story." Alara was quiet for a long moment, watching my cattle move across the pasture in the dying light. "And you?" she asked, her voice soft. "What will you do?" "Same as always, I suppose. Work the ranch. Tend the cattle." I paused, then looked at her directly, the words forming on their own, surprising even me. "Though it occurs to me that this place, it could use a woman's touch. And maybe some extra hands for the work. Are you offering me a job, Jed Stone?" A hint of a smile played on her lips. "I'm offering you a home," I said, my gaze holding hers. "If you want it." Alara's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I've been running for so long, Jed. I'd forgotten what home felt like." "It feels like this," I said. And for the first time in 12 years, I meant it. 6 months later, travelers passing through the territory would tell stories of the peaceful ranch where a scarred man and a green-eyed woman built something beautiful from the ashes of violence. They raised cattle, and rumors said children would soon follow. They welcomed strangers, a gentle warmth replacing the hard solitude I'd once guarded. And they never spoke of the day when blood on fence posts changed everything. I kept my Winchester cleaned and ready, but I never had to use it again. Some battles once won stay won, and some peace once earned lasts forever. The ranch that had sheltered one broken soul became a sanctuary for 2 healing hearts, proving that sometimes the best things in life begin with the courage to help a stranger in need. The story of Jedediah Stone and Alara Vance carries a profound message about redemption, compassion, and the strength it takes to open one's heart. It reminds us that it's never too late to reach out, to do what is right, and to find new meaning in life. No matter how old we are or how deep our past wounds may run, it is through kindness and the courage to stand up for others that we can begin to heal our own souls. Like Jed, sometimes in saving someone else, we end up saving ourselves.